To you. Today is Monday, the 9th of March 2026. My name is Francisco Gaffney, and this is my daily streaming all about governance, risk, compliance, and advisory boards. So, this week, I want to show you something many boards learn too late or already know it, but they are not applied very often. And I have some interesting statistics that I'm going to show you today. And here it is. Revenue is not protection, the profits are not proof or evidence, and the valuation is not a reward for effort. So it doesn't mean that actually you do more and the valuation is going to increase. No, valuation is confidence. And here's why. It's from the lenders, the regulators, and the shareholders and the stockholders. So that's the confidence, that's the valuation, that's the multiples there where they are coming from. Yes, you say, well, hold on a second, revenue and EBITDA. Yeah, that's true. But higher multiples are coming also from confidence, and I'm going to explain this clearly today. And the whole week, we are going to address this confidence situation in terms of how founders, executive teams, non-executive directors, board of directors look into build this confidence, right? So now let's look into the model again, because this is the biggest challenge. So the companies are too busy, and companies are the executive teams, the founders, the non-executive directors, etc., are too busy managing the next fire. And here's the problem: is this graph that you see? Everything is happening at the same time in the same place, right? So everything is happening at the same time in the same place. Your brand is out there with social media now. Your people are commenting and doing things in LinkedIn. So your partnership, distribution, and channels are already working on your behalf or with you in certain activities. So then you have your strategies and your performances, your governance, risk, and compliance, your assets. And one of the assets I want to mention particularly this week is your intellectual properties. And also this is all related to revenues. So the thing that actually creates a higher valuation in front of or a better view of your organization is at the bottom, the systems, right? So we're going to talk about performances in one instance, mostly in governance, risk, and compliance, and also what are your assets in terms of valuation. So I'm going to leave this in the screen. I'm going to explain this because it's very important to understand this. So the valuation and where it's coming from, and I mentioned already, is not based on effort. It is confidence that the businesses can absorb shocks, explain itself clearly to capital, withstand scrutiny from regulators, and keep operating when conditions turn, right? So that's the confidence what I'm talking about. That is why I'm using one model, and this is an international advisory board that helps a company, a founder, or executive team fill the capability gaps faster than waiting for one executive hire without being consulting, without a big consulting overhead, without a talent locked in, and with the option to swap a specialist every 6 months as priorities changes. So that is going to give you a better flexibility in terms of find those bottlenecks, address those bottlenecks, and order your blind spots. So today, in terms of the asset point of view, which is the bottom right here, is the governance assets. And you say, why governance should be an asset? It's not an asset. Yeah, it is. And let me explain this because it's very interesting how it's put together. So the specific asset is your risk and controls architecture, right? So if you say, well, that why is an asset? Because it's the way you address the things, the bit of the businesses that proves the company is governable, fundable, and transferable. And these are the things that all investors, regulators, and founders and funding are looking for. Because here's the risk, and here's the word again: risk, risk, risk. The risk is a structural invisibility, right? So when you see a property, and I'm going to bring to a physical level this, uh, you might be the painting and decorating is impressive, the flooring, the tiling, the joinery. You say, well, what is it? The roofing is all impressive, the heating system, the air conditioning. But the things that are invisible, that always is advised in property, is hire a quantity surveyor so they can check the foundations. Always check the foundations. And people say, well, but it's standing, there's no cracks on the walls, etc. But you never know. So that's why you had to check the foundations of the properties all the time. This is structural invisibility. What is the risk? So it lives in company terms. It lives in the gap between what the profit and loss says, profit and loss sheet says, and what the board can prove, right? So that gap is where it leaves these invisibility structural requirements. So a business can look busy, profitable, even ambitious, and still be fragile in all the places that matter, which is who is founder dependent. Their RP are commercialized, but they are not protected. Could be that many things. Actually, I'm going to cover all of them this week, so I don't want to go too deep right now. But let's take a look at three problems to consider. Problem number one, and here's where the evidence of these problems are coming through, because it's not something I made up, it's all documented. The UK Corporate Governance Code 2024 has raised the bar. So provision 29 asks boards to make a declaration of the effectiveness of their material internal controls. There you are. That means that boards are being pushed beyond broad reassurance and towards evidence-backed accountability, right? So this is where you start to see where are our reports here, because it's not just a narrative anymore. We have to show evidence. Problem number two is the Financial Reporting Council 2024 review of 130 companies found that 25 of them failed to report. That's 20% of the companies audited. So, or to report clearly. So the effectiveness of internal controls is very important to report now. So you have to do, or you fail, or you're not doing clearly, or you're doing it right. And this is coming directly from the Financial Reporting Council 2024 reports. So they are stored in 2025. So I guess that figure is going to increase. So this is not a theory problem anymore. It is a live reporting weakness inside listed companies governance. And here's no problem number three, because you might be thinking now and say, well, that doesn't affect me because actually I'm not a listed company. Problem number three is that it is affecting everybody because the pressure is wider in the wider system is still real. And in last year, 2025, 1 in 190 companies on the effective register enter insolvency, while compulsory liquidation reached their highest annual total since 2012. And we are talking 2012, that's out of the recovery of the financial crisis of 2008, 2009. That is a reminder that weak structures still get exposed when cash, confidence, or control sleeps. And here's something else. I'll give you a very practical example on this. If you remember ESG, or environmental, social, and governance. So it's still going on. In the UK, particularly, it's called SRS. Across Europe, ESG and CSRS. Anyway, so it's all terminologies and anachronisms. But the point is that remember that you have to do reporting on sometimes you ask about carbon footprint, scope 1, 2, or 3, or you're asked about equality hiring or gender diversity, or you're asked about carbon emissions that I mentioned, or you ask about fair wages, and the list goes on and on and on. Why you have to do this if you don't have a legal obligation to report that or to be compliance with it, or you don't have also the option to do it voluntarily, but you are asked to do or put that in your tenders when you're applying for or renewing contracts with bigger organizations, etc. Because this is cascading from the larger organizations down to everybody else, right? So if you think that the structural evidence for your company in terms of governance is not a requirement to you, it's only for the large or listed companies, just be careful, because it's cascading to you anyways. And we just have the evidence here that I mentioned with the register of insolvency. So the companies are failing to report, and when they are failing to report, it means actually it's a structural problem in terms of how they document and evidence their things. It's not just necessarily that the business is going bad. Sometimes that lack of a structure is what makes a business fail. Be careful with that. So, in other words, imagine a clean profit and loss without a control architecture. It's like a polished cockpit with the loose wiring at the back end. So the dashboard lights work very fine, but actually you have a disaster happening there, and it's very unsafe. And when many times the statistics say that the business fails between the year 3 and 5 or 7, it's not necessarily because the idea is bad or the founder or the team is not capable. It's because the foundations are not as strong as they should be when they have to be when they are tested by the market, by the finances, by the social pressures. Because sometimes the socials want to say, what have to do with that? Imagine how fast the fashion industry changed lately, with all these accessible, very cheap fabrics coming, or models coming from different countries down into your country. And shops are closing, or a distributor or network of brands are now in high stress because of the fast delivery and the variety of models that they can produce in weeks, when you have to prepare the whole season perhaps in a year or 6 months, right? So these are the things that are changing, and if you don't have a very strong foundations in your business, and premium pricing because of the value that you're producing, and this is coming from intellectual property, then you are challenged by these changes and you might be in trouble. So remember, this is not for only big organization with board of directors. Actually, if you are a limited company or a founder and you have funding, you can have an advisory board that actually is a fraction of the cost of a non-executive board, and I can advise you. And here is where the boards, the traditionals, get caught. They are not usually ignoring risk. That's correct. They have meetings, they have papers, they have controls somewhere, and they have good people doing sensible things. But the informal is not the same as institutional, right? So having all this structure, it doesn't mean that existing is part of their ecosystem, part of the DNA. And what cannot be explained clearly to capital gets discounted, meaning your access to funding start to get very narrow. Your stockholders start to ask a lot of questions. Your founders, if you're backed, start to ask a lot of questions too, and you start to get to that, what I said at the beginning, all the firefighting rather than finding the ecosystem as supporting each other and finding where the gaps are automatically in the system, because it's evident, because everything is happening right here, right now, in this moment. So that is pretty much the trap. You can feel in control internally while still looking unconvincing externally. So you might say, well, the people doesn't know what we're doing inside the company, so we are good. But when looked from the outside in, is not very convincing, and the questions start to ask, they're very uncomfortable. So you still have growth, but hidden dependencies. You can have a profit and still have funding fragility because your access to funding is restricted. You can have a strategy deck and still have no board grade evidence that material controls and properly designed, owned and tested and reviewed are evidence in that deck or in your pitch. And when you look for funding, investors, or refinancing, they say no, and they don't explain these things to you. So pretty much you have to start to guesswork. Why not? And then you go into this madness of spray and pray. So send the pitch deck to everybody and pray that somebody's come back to you and say, we are interested. But most likely you get most of the time the not interested answer without further explanation. So as a board advisor, what I would propose to consider is the following. First, spare performance or separate performance from protection. Ask one blunt question. If an investor, lender, or regulator asked the board tomorrow how the company knows its material controls are effective, could you be able to answer clearly evidenced with backup evidence, and not just a narrated, uh, vaguely narrate what you're doing. So you have to have the evidence of these controls and effectiveness that is required. That is now central to the code, as we mentioned, but also is cascading to all your downstream and upstream too, because they are asked for this information. So even if it's not mandatory, voluntary, or required from you, you'll probably start to feel that coming your way more often. The second thing is that they test whether growth is outrunning discipline, right? So you might be growing very well, but actually it's outrunning disciplines. And the Office of National Statistics said output per hour worked on the labor force surveys measured was 0.5% lower in Q4 2025 than the earlier that year. So that 2 months ago, this is statistics. So it's right around the corner. Why that matters? Because more activity does not automatically translate into greater resilience or usable capacity. And I'm going to say something that is not going to be very welcome, perhaps, but actually is a reality. Don't be a busy fool. More work doesn't mean that you are doing the right things. So be careful there. And the third thing, as an advisor, what I can suggest is to move risk out of institution into architecture, right? So move the risk out from the company itself into the foundation, how you do the things. So the Financial Reporting Council guidance is clear that boards should consider failings, near misses, and weaknesses when assessing material controls. So the job is not to sound confident. The job is to create monitored, reviewable evidence of how you operate a company. Now, let's make this practical, because it's a good statistic, good ideas. Now, how we can make this practical? So when I say governance assets, I don't mean more paperwork. What I mean is a company-specific system that clearly shows 5 things. Number 1, what are the material risks? Number 2, which controls matter most? Number 3, who owns them? Who is responsible? Who's accountable? Number 4, how they are tested. And number 5, what the board does when weakness appears, what you do. So that is when governance stops being a compliance narrative and starts becoming a value asset. Remember, I love an asset because actually that is transferable for the next person, and is proof to when we are talking to investors, lenders, regulators, etc., etc. And this is exactly where a board advisor and an international advisory board earn their keep, right? So not by replacing the management, not by writing a glossy report, but by bringing in the exact specialist capability the board is missing across risk, capital, operations, technology, international expansion, or transformation, and changing that capability as a company next constraint change. So we can help you to be more and better. So what do you gain working with me? 3 things: outcomes, differentiators, and risk reduction. In terms of outcomes, you get a board-ready map from the principal risk to material controls to evidence, so that directors can speak with more confidence to investors, lenders, auditors, and regulators. That is the shift from informal comfort to explainable control. We explain what we do in terms of control. In terms of differentiator, I do this as a board advisory by assembling an international advisory board around the company's real bottlenecks or blind sides. So that gives you a specialist capability faster than a single executive hire. That is very costly, it takes a lot of time, and then you're stuck with one talent in one particular area instead of having a heavy consulting overhead, or without locking the business into a single form of expertise. And then what you do with that? We can swap members every 6 months. So in terms of risk reduction, actually, this is where the hidden fragility looks when it becomes visible. And I have an example here. Is a company in the London Stock Exchange that have a revenues of 130K in FY24, continued funding challenge, material uncertainties around going concern, and a pipeline in which 3 clients accounted for 95% of the total figure. So And they also stated that the pipeline was not revenue. So this is the kind of things when you report to the street, to the city, these kind of things, and then you start to realize that actually, yes, we have to report this because we are, but which is the controls that we have that start to unlock all the possibilities while we are doing the job, right? So the message today is perhaps uncomfortable, but it's very useful. Profits is not the risk, growth is not the risk, ambition is not the risk. The structural invisibility is the risk. That's where you have the foundation of your organization. Because once the board cannot prove how the business is controlled, the market writes its own story. So you don't want other people telling what is happening in your house. You want to say, this is my house, this is how we govern our house, this is our foundations, and this is our story. And the market is usually harsher than your own management. So one action you can take home today, and is doable in 30 minutes or less: ask your CFO or your accounting team, company secretary or audit chair for a one-page list of the company's 5 material controls, who own each one of them and how each is tested, and what evidence the board would rely on that today. So let's pause it here for today and reconvene tomorrow, because tomorrow I will show you why founder dependency quietly destroyed transferability even when the numbers look good on paper, meaning that actually when you're looking into regulators, funding, investors or auditors, if you have a founder dependency, that is one of the biggest risks that you may have, but nobody's telling you that in plain white and white black ink. White, the founder dependency is a risk, and we don't like it. They say probably other things, but are running circles. But tomorrow we're going to discuss that in detail. So if you are a founder-led leadership team or an investor-backed executive group, and you want help building this governance asset through an international advisory board, set up a 30-minute call so I can understand your position and how an independent international advisory board looking from the outside in can help you and your team without stepping on your toes, without a traditional consulting overhead, and without the public theater. Have a great day, and I'll see you tomorrow. Thank you, and bye-bye.